promote flame retardants. What we know is that babies born in the U.S. have the highest flame retardants in their bodies at birth, in cord blood, than anywhere else in the world. The rate of flame retardants in humans, in adults, is doubling every 2 to 5 years since 1970. So we are just increasing the amount of flame retardants in our bodies. This documentary came out just last fall, November 2013, and it's called Toxic Hot Seat, and it's a movie basically talking about the fire department and flame retardants and what's actually happening in terms of the exposures that are happening because of flame retardants. So June of 2013, a year ago, they did a very, very small pilot study where they were testing the blood of firefighters immediately after responding to a fire, and found that they had more than 3 times the levels of PBDEs, which is a polychlorinated, basically a PCB-like substance. It's a flame retardant, and hundreds of times higher levels of dioxins and furans. So arsenic, I'm just having a little technical issue here with this one. Bear with me, I'm almost there. Great. So 75% of all treated wood before 2004 has arsenic in it. There is 27 grams of arsenic in a 2x6 that's 12 feet long, and that is enough to kill 200 people. The ash, 1 teaspoonful of ash from burned treated wood is enough to kill an adult. So think about the ash that you're being exposed to in a fire with pressure-treated wood. Again, it's in water. So arsenic comes into the groundwater and it is part of fertilizer, and so it's in the groundwater getting taken up. It's also rat poison. This gets stored. So we're moving into heavy metals now, and heavy metals are less volatile than those solvents. This is the stuff that's getting stored in your body, gets tucked away, and stays there for a long, long time. Hair, nails, skin, bones, teeth, brain. Again, it's coming in through all 3 routes. When you look at the literature, it talks about transdermal and coming through the skin as not being a significant source. But I think we've talked enough earlier on what the risks are when you're actually on the scene at a fire with this part of the body, with the heat, with the other chemicals. I actually think the transdermal route is a pretty effective way of getting arsenic into the body. I think it actually is passing fairly easily transdermally. A lot of skin lesions, digestive dysfunction, liver disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, as well as various cancers, lung, skin, bladder, and kidney. Cadmium, another heavy metal. This is found in batteries and various pigments. McDonald's did a huge recall on Shrek drinking glasses because there was high levels of cadmium in it. Tobacco in different foods. It's contaminated in foods, essentially. It also gets stored in the body, in the liver and the kidneys. It's also coming in through those same routes and causing a lot of kidney dysfunction. So one of the things about cadmium is it actually gets stored in the membranes of the kidney. And when it sits in the membrane of the kidney, think of the kidney as filtering your blood and allowing you to urinate, but getting toxins out through the urine. When the cadmium's sitting there, it's actually preventing that and really clogging up the drain, essentially. So lung disease, bone disease, high blood pressure, and various cancers. Lead, we think of lead when we think of lead pipes and lead paint, but lead is also in batteries, it's in bullets, it's in roofing material. It's gotten banned in general gasoline, but it is still present in gasoline that you buy for off-road vehicles and for boats and things like that. So there's still lead in that fuel. And it's actually in cosmetics. There's a lot of contamination in lipstick and other makeup products that actually contain lead. It gets stored in the bones. In an adult, the majority of it is going to be in your bones, also in teeth, but there's some level in soft tissue and organs, liver and kidney. Again, coming in through the same ways. And, a main thing of lead is it actually causes a lot of high blood pressure, in addition to all the cancers and brain dysfunction and infertility. When they were looking, they did a meta-analysis of lead and high blood pressure and basically said no amount of lead is safe. So here we are talking about, what's happening. We've just talked about all the different chemicals. So now let's talk about what do we need to do about those exposures. So basically, we want to reduce the exposures that you're having. We've just talked about all these chemicals. Now we need to reduce the way that you're actually getting exposed to them. Then we need to protect your cells, because no matter how much we reduce, you always will be getting exposed to something. That's the nature of this job. We're trying to make it as safe as possible, but you will be getting exposed to some level. So how do we protect you from those exposures? And then finally, how do we take the toxins out that you've already gotten or that are going to be coming? How do we get them out of your system? So this is where we're going to go with the whole rest of it. And what I want to start with, obviously, is the reduce your exposures. So the main place to reduce your primary exposures are going to be at the fire scene and in the station. The way that you're going to reduce the secondary exposures, so the chemicals that have now changed their chemistry a little bit, is going to be during overhaul and with the contamination of gear. So in August of 2013, the Firefighter Cancer Support Network produced this document called Taking Action Against Cancer in the Fire Service. And they actually went through and studied what was happening in the fire station and what are all the different problems, and then actually came up with a whole list of solutions. So their list of problems, firefighters are working with, self-contained breathing apparatus on their back, but no mask on. They've got contaminated gear in the cab before and after. The cab interior is rarely decontaminated. You've got diesel exhaust contamination in the bay. You've got bunker gear that's stored in the bay that's contaminated with diesel. You're bringing contaminated gear into your sleeping quarters. There's only one set of gear, so you're continuing to get recontaminated from previous fires every time you're putting on turnouts that haven't been cleaned. Bunker gear that goes unwashed, contaminated gear that's getting transported in personal vehicles, helmets that are getting rarely cleaned. And then, not taking a shower immediately following a fire. Sometimes you can't. You're getting called off the fire and sent to a medical call, and there you are in full contaminated gear. And not doing gross decon on the site.
Hey, let me ask a question on the showering, because we've had some questions on that around the department, and that may seem silly, but is showering for decontamination purposes different than taking the personal hygiene type shower? I mean, there's been some questions about,
Right.
Should I use hot water because that's going to open my pores, or versus cold water that's going to close my pores? I mean, do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I've been really thinking about this a lot, and I've been toying with this fantasy of having this nice shower stall right outside the fire where you basically can walk through like a car wash, and have hot soapy water blasted at you, fully clothed, just hosing you off. The truth is it depends on what the substances are that you've been exposed to, how we're going to get them off. Some of them are not that water soluble, so you really do need some sort of a soap or, solvent-like material in order to get them off. A lot of them are going to be more soluble in warm water than they are in cold water. So I think even though there is that, it is true that you're going to open your pores more with warm water, and you are going to possibly allow more things to kind of get in. I think you're going to get more things off if you're using warm water that you would not get off if you had cold water. Aside from just the logistics of you wouldn't take a 5 or 10 minute cold water shower. I mean, you would just be in there trying to get out. So, you want to be able to be in there and use soap and get it off. I think it is more detailed than just a routine personal shower, because I think you are actively trying to get the substances off your body, and the sooner the better, because as we talked about, all these substances are coming in through your skin. So the longer they're sitting there, the longer they have a chance to kind of come into your body.
So a good scrubbing with warm water and soap is still pretty much the recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Until we can get that portable shower stall.
Okay.
So they came up with a bunch of solutions. They basically said use breathing gear from the very initial attack all the way to the finish of overhaul. Do gross field decon, of all your personal protective equipment. Use baby wipes to try and get as much stuff off while you're still on the scene as fast as possible. Change your clothes and wash them immediately after a fire. Shower thoroughly after a fire. Clean all of your gear, including your hood and your helmet, immediately after a fire. Don't take contaminated clothing or turnouts or even breathing gear or PPEs home or store them in your vehicle. Decon your fire apparatus interior after a fire. So keep bunker gear out of living and sleeping quarters. So the inside of the cab, here you are with all of your contaminated gear. You've just gotten back in the rig. You're sitting on the fabric seats, and you've now contaminated the seats. You've gone back. You've decontaminated. You're sending your gear to be cleaned. You've showered. You've changed. And then you get a call, and you're back sitting on that same contaminated seat, and you're just being re-exposed. So essentially, structure fires really should be thought of as hazmat situations. I mean, in an actual hazmat situation, everything is slowed down. You're worrying about what's the chemical keeping people away, keeping people safe, and trying to really make sure you know what you're doing before you're going further. And I think with structure fires, the same thing needs to happen. You are being exposed to many, many, many chemicals in every structure fire, and you don't even know how many. And so slowing down to really kind of assess what's happening, how much needs to be different, how much you need to wear your breathing apparatus, how far you need to be to have a safe breathing zone, etc. And assume toxicity even when the fire's out. So this was another one that just hit the news in May, which is that there are now more police officers who have died from 9/11 related illnesses than those who died during the attacks. There were 60 who died on the day that the towers fell, and there are 71 as of May 2014 that have now died with actually that term, 9/11 related illnesses. It took 12 and a half years. So that's the other thing that we need to know about cancer is, remember back in those early slides when we were talking about the DNA damage, you're getting these kind of insults, they're happening, they're building up. It takes a while for that to translate into a cancer, and it takes a while for that cancer to then start to grow. And so then even once people have been diagnosed, you're still looking at treatments and doing various things before people die from the disease, if they're going to die from the disease. September of 2013 was the last time that they've released kind of numbers on people working or living near the World Trade Center, and they say it's more than 1,100 people who've now been diagnosed with cancer who were in that area. And, that area, again, what's happening there is not necessarily the initial insult of that day when the towers fell, but actually overhaul. When you're thinking about for the next 4 to 6 to 8 months, there were things smoldering, there was smoke, it was happening down there that entire time, and everybody who worked down there or lived down there or was on the scene doing overhaul, essentially, was being exposed. And that's, I think, where we're seeing the damage. It's not from that one event and from that actual single day. It's from the long-term being down there and working with those exposures.
So what happened there at the World Trade Center, that's a good case study, I guess, to really be able to correlate some of these figures and stuff, too. I mean, as unfortunate as that whole thing was, and then for later, for the illnesses and stuff that came up later is a pretty good example of, or at least a kind of a test, so to speak, of the type of exposures you have and the potential for things, I guess.
Yes, because we're talking about current objects and current things. We're talking about the amount of computers and plastics and things that, the nanotechnology that was being released. So we're talking about a lot of things that are currently in homes that you are being exposed to during a fire in kind of this big concentrated way, where you have these huge building
And large populations exposed.
and large populations exposed. And so, part of what's happening is this term, 9/11 related illnesses is an ever-expanding list, right?
Yeah.
So you've got this population, and every, 6 months or so, the diseases and the conditions and the cancers that are on that list is growing, because they're going, oh, I guess this is related to that too. So... And, there's a lot of struggle with that right now. I mean, there's a lot of people who've been diagnosed with cancer who are fighting to say this was because of this incident, and they're being told, no, it can't be. It's unrelated. It's not on the list.
Right.
So there's a lot of that stuff happening too. But, yeah. So air quality, I wanted to talk about this because we've just been talking about the air quality and seeing kind of what's happening when you have all these exposures. But truthfully, our bedrooms are actually the place that we spend the most time when we're sleeping in our homes. And the air within our homes is actually more seriously polluted than the outdoor air. And it's hard to get a handle on that, because you're thinking, I live in a really smoggy city, or I live in a really, but part of what's happening is you're carrying that stuff in, and it's getting concentrated and held, essentially. It's like an inversion, your own little inversion in your house. So, and we spend the majority of the time in our bedrooms, and we're rebreathing that all night long. So one of the things to do if you're trying to kind of keep sleeping quarters clean and keep the air clean is try and keep all shoes out, try and keep all turnouts and boots out, keep all potentially contaminated gear out, try and shower before you've entered. In your own home, putting an air filter, even getting an air filter in sleeping quarters, but having something where the air that you're breathing when you're sleeping and when you're there for a majority of time is actually safe and clean is pretty important. So now we're going to kind of shift gears and talk about protecting your cells. But I think before we do that, why don't we take a little...
Yeah, let's take maybe 10-minute break here. Is that 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Kind of just stop here, and we'll get more here in a little bit. So thank you.
So that was all heavy, and now we'll shift gears and talk about what
Yeah.
we can do about it.
Okay, good. Right at the part where we get to brighten things up a little bit for us.
We've just spent a lot of time talking about what are your exposures, how are they getting into the body, what can we do to kind of reduce the risk of exposure, and now we get to kind of shift gears and start talking about how do we protect yourselves from the exposures that you're getting, and how are we going to get these things out? How are we going to figure out what's in there and figure out how to get them out? So, talking about protecting your cells, basically we're talking about diet, lifestyle, and nutrients. So let's move right into diet. I know that there's a lot of controversy in terms of what's the right diet. And the first thing I want to say is fruits and vegetables. So especially your dark leafy greens, and especially the Dirty Dozen. So if you haven't already gone to this website, it's the Environmental Working Group, ewg.com.org. Environmental Working Group. I don't know if it's .com or .org. They have produced a list. They've basically tested fruits and vegetables and looked to see how many residues of chemicals are left on top of them. And they have created a list that you can basically print out and take with you in your pocket to the store when you're shopping. So the Dirty Dozen, these are the ones that are the most heavily pesticided and have chemicals on them that are going to be adding to your toxic load. So these are the ones on the left side, the Dirty Dozen, are the ones to get organic. Don't go to the store and buy apples that are not organic, or spinach, or strawberries. It's strawberry season in town. The chemicals that they use, there's a lot of them, and they're in high concentration on top of this Dirty Dozen list. The Clean 15, on the other hand, is these are all fruits and vegetables that really have very few pesticides on them. So if you can't find these organic, just get them non-organic. It's totally fine.
So let me just interrupt you. So I guess in context, So basically, we're saying firefighters already have a huge toxic load.
Yes.
And so we're pretty much talking about things you can do on the other end to reduce your toxic load, I guess. So
Yeah.
if you're real high over here on one end, then do whatever you can on the other end to kind of reduce things. Is that kind of what we're after?
Yes. I mean, I actually feel like we should be, even those of us who aren't having really high exposures, we're running the risk of ingesting a lot of crazy toxins. So DDT, for example, was banned in 1977 in the U.S. It's still manufactured in the U.S. It's exported for use in agriculture and mosquito control, and we import those things right back into the country with DDT on them. So there are people here in this country who don't travel who have high levels of current exposure of DDT, and it is purely from eating foods on the Dirty Dozen list. They're eating the DDT that's coming back from other countries. So there's these gaps in the system in terms of being able to protect us. Like, we would think that if we've banned it since 1977, we shouldn't be eating it in our country now in 2014. But that is what's happening. And, there's more than 5 billion pounds of pesticides used. This is a number from 2007. A lot of this residue is going to be on the Dirty Dozen. You're going to have that banned DDT. And beyond just that, beyond just increasing your toxic load, you're already really toxic from the fires and from all these substances, you're also getting less bang for your buck. So plants have higher amounts of nutrients when they're grown organically. Plants also make higher amounts of antioxidants when they're grown organically. And this kind of makes sense intuitively if you think about it. A plant makes the antioxidants usually as a protection from some predator or some sort of fungus or mold or something like that. They're making this in their cells. If you spray something with a fungicide, the plant has no need to be able to make that level of antioxidant. It's not going to be making the same kind of thing. So you're going to be ingesting the fungicide and not really getting the amount of antioxidant and all this nutrient that you want from the plant in the first place.
Does that environmental working group, you said it measures the pesticide residue on the fruit or the vegetable, does it address the systemic pesticides?
It addresses systemic pesticides. It looks at what's left over based on how you normally would handle a food. So it looks as if you were to peel it. They peel it first and then they check it. If you're not going to peel it like an apple, they would test what's kind of left on the skin. And, I mean, that's a good question. Are they testing the inside of the apple? I'm not totally sure.
The only reason I ask is because I've done that myself with some equipment we have, and the pesticide was on the outside and on the inside. It was an apple that we used.
Yes.
But, I have my own reservations of, the term organic, and, a lot of controversy with that. And I've always kind of questioned the validity of how do you know it's good or bad. Do you have an answer to that, or?
Yeah, it's interesting. There is a lot of controversy around it. So, for something to be labeled organic, it has to go through a bunch of certification, through legal hoops. And sometimes when you talk to small farmers, their complaint is that they can't afford it. They can't afford to go through the amount of testing and hoops in order to be able to have that certification, but very often they're still treating what they're doing organically. They're doing it in an organic manner. So I think that it is true. Big business kind of has hijacked some of the organic kind of trademarks and things like that. You can also start to kind of get into what's actually happening to pesticide use. I mean, when pesticides are sprayed on a field, what's happening with airflow and blowing, and is that really not getting onto all the plants in the area there, and is it also not getting onto the organic stuff? I think at this point, this is kind of the best label that we can use right now. It's the best thing. When something is labeled organic, we know that they've had to have their soil tested. We know that they're not allowed to use various chemical fertilizers, fungicides, that they're having to kind of manage what they're growing in a different way, which means that there's going to be less pesticides on top of it, less pesticides taken up by the plant. I'm still a big proponent of going to farmers markets and having a conversation with the person who's growing your food and having the conversation with the farmer and asking them, One of the flaws with that is that sometimes if they haven't done testing, they don't know. And lead in the Northwest is actually really high in paint, and it's pretty heavy, and when people have had houses repainted, the lead is in the soil. And if someone hasn't retested their soil, they're growing vegetables in basically a lead environment, and they're uptaking it. And you can have this nice conversation, and the farmer can have the best of intentions and really believe that they've grown it organically, and yet it has high lead levels. So it's a little bit of both. I still am a really big proponent of farmers markets and talking to people who are growing your food and eating from people that you know have grown it, or growing your own. Grow a vegetable garden. Have some things in there, and you can kind of see. A big piece of the pesticide use is partly because of how farming has changed. When you grow a small vegetable garden and you have a variety of different crops, they're all kind of protecting each other. And if you have crop failure, you only have crop failure in one little area. Whereas what's happened is now, in order to be able to harvest and do things with machines and have mass quantities, you have entirely huge plots of land that are dedicated to just one crop. And when you do that, your risk for crop failure is much more serious. And if you have crop failure, it's much more serious. So, you're much more invested in spraying and doing things in order to kind of keep that crop going.
One thing I know we have availability to us on in our area is quite a few CSAs.
Yes.
So the farmers market, of course, but there's quite a few of those, co-op deals. I know several people belong to those in the department, so maybe people can ask around, where they pick some of that stuff up.
Yeah.
And again, everybody always talks about the cost, and the cost is a little bit more, but I always think to myself, man, what would be the cost if I got cancer? And that's a big one. We talked about that.
And this is one of the best ways of protecting yourself, really, is the food you're eating. Because the food you're eating is coming in and communicating with your body. I mean, it's building every single cell. It's, we think of a cell as just being this kind of static thing, but it's actually not. I mean, the cell has this kind of lipid layer all the way around the outside, and every time you're eating fats are coming out, fats are going in. It's this ever-changing kind of dynamic. So if you go from eating, a lot of trans fats to switching your diet and eating a lot of omega-3 fats, the cells are actually going to change. You are what you eat. They're going to be coming out and go. Other ones are going to be coming in, and you're going to basically transform your body. So, there's a lot of data showing that changing your diet can really impact cancer risk, can impact your health, can help you feel better, reduce cardiovascular risk. I mean, there's so much data out there now in terms of food, the food we eat.
Yeah, okay. So eat your fruits and vegetables. I guess
Eat
Mom
your
was right.
fruits and vegetables, exactly.
All right.
So basically, and that's the first place I'm going to start is with fruits and vegetables, because almost every single diet that's out there, and every single study of stuff has shown that it decreases your risk of cancer, decreases your risk of recurrence if you do have cancer, decreases your risk of dying if you do have cancer. Like this is ubiquitous. This is, nobody really argues about fruits and vegetables. We all need to eat more fruits and vegetables. So I'm going to just kind of move through a few of the different fruits and vegetables and kind of talk about what the constituent is, partly as a way to get you all really excited about eating fruits and vegetables. So grapes contain resveratrol. Resveratrol you can now buy in a capsule at the store, or you can eat grapes. It's a super potent antioxidant. It's anti-inflammatory. Dark grapes have more resveratrol than light grapes, and grape leaves have actually way more resveratrol than grapes. These grapes are in that dirty dozen. They're really heavily pesticided. So again, you're going to get all this toxin if you're eating grapes that are not organic, and you're also going to get less resveratrol because the plant doesn't make as much when it's not organic.
Hey, can I ask you something there?
Yeah.
I've heard this term antioxidant before. Now, what is that? How does that play into?
So think of oxidation as rusting. So oxidation is the form when oxygen comes and transforms something and it's starting to kind of break down. And an antioxidant is preventing oxidation. So it's anti-inflammatory, and an antioxidant is supporting the whole oxidative system in our bodies from not having, like, we actually need both. We need oxidation, we need antioxidation, but we tend to not have as much antioxidants in our bodies, so the balance gets shifted, and we need more antioxidants in order to kind of protect our cells. So when there's damage, the antioxidants are protecting them.
Oh, okay, so they just need to be available in the body for the cellular growth piece.
Yes, and protection from what you're being exposed to, from being exposed to sunlight, from being exposed to chemicals, from being exposed to all the different things that are considered oxidants.
Okay.
So it's more than just prevention, it's actually kind of healing any damage that has occurred as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, healing. Berries contain ellagic acid. Again, you can buy ellagic acid now as a capsule, or you can eat, look at these delicious berries. It's found in all sorts of different berries, like I just showed you, as well as pomegranates. It really helps to prevent genetic damage by toxins. So remember those early kind of images that we showed about how damage happens at the DNA level, especially cigarettes in the lung, so it really helps protect the lung. And again, this term antioxidant, and it's not destroyed by freezing or freeze drying, but it is destroyed by heat. So, freezing your blueberries, freezing all your berries, throwing them in a smoothie, you're getting tons of ellagic acid. When you cook them, you're getting less ellagic acid. You're still getting a lot of benefit, so don't be afraid of eating things that are cooked. And in fact, we're going to talk about lycopene, which you can also buy in a capsule, which is found in tomatoes. It's a really potent antioxidant. It tends to concentrate in the prostate. So there's been a lot of conversation about how it slows prostate cancer tumor growth, how it can shrink the tumor, how it can lower PSA. But it's also linked with colon, cervical, lung, and breast cancer, reducing risks. And the interesting thing about lycopene is it's actually better absorbed in cooked tomatoes rather than the raw. So the big overall picture of eating your fruits and vegetables is eat your fruits and vegetables. Eat a variety. I'm trying to show you how there's different things in different components. Every single fruit or vegetable is going to have some nutrient in there that's actually going to be beneficial. Some are going to be better raw, some are going to be better cooked. Doesn't matter. Just get them in. Cook your food, throw the vegetables in, have some raw, do a little bit of everything so you're covering all your bases. Cruciferous vegetables, also known as brassica vegetables, your broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and into your mustard greens and collards and chard. These contain the substance called indole 3-carbinol, again, a product you can buy in a capsule. All of these cruciferous vegetables contain them, and part of what this does is it actually shifts the way estrogen is metabolized in the body. But beyond just estrogen metabolism, it actually shifts the way your liver detoxify things and helps to detoxify other substances and move them out of the body a lot easier and quickly and more protectively. We're going to talk really in detail about what the liver does a little bit later on and how it kind of works. But
Let me just, what is estrogen metabolism? How is that important?
yeah. So we all have hormones in our bodies, and we all have estrogen, men included. And when you have hormones that are released, they all get cleared by the liver, the same way drugs get cleared by the liver, the same way other chemicals get cleared by the liver. Estrogen has a bunch of different pathways it can go in order to be cleared. And what we know about that now is that there's some pathways that are actually increasing the risk of cancer. There's other pathways that actually protect and are decreasing the risk of cancer. So obviously we want to shunt the metabolism of the way that estrogen is broken down into a pathway that's more protective. All of the hormones and chemicals have to get broken down in your body. So very often the process of breaking them down makes them a little bit more toxic before they actually become water soluble and kind of come out of the body. And so trying to find a way to make that even safer or better, you're looking at cruciferous vegetables.
Okay.
Broccoli sprouts actually have the highest amount of indole 3-carbinol. Mushrooms. So I know that there's a lot of talk specifically about the mushrooms that are kind of immune stimulating that people can buy, reishi and maitake and things like that in supplement form. But all mushrooms have benefit. all mushrooms contain immune stimulants that actually help you have a stronger fighting immune system, help reduce your risk of colds and flus and other things that you're getting in contact with. And specifically with cancer, help to prevent cancer, but once you've gotten cancer, also help to kind of have the tumor cells kill themselves, decrease the risk of metastasis. You know, one of the problems that happens with cancer, as we talked about down there, is they've lost their ability to kill themselves. And sometimes you can actually get them to regain that a little bit by shifting things like this, where you're restarting that pathway that got kind of broken. So you can get mushrooms at the grocery store, and even the button mushrooms contain immune stimulants. What's going to be better are going to be some of the more unusual ones. So shiitake, which they have at the store usually, and looks like a regular mushroom with maybe a thinner stem, has a ton of immune stimulating qualities. And you can treat it just like any other mushroom, slice it up and saute it and cook it, or throw it in soup or stew or something like that. In the Northwest, we happen to have a lot of mushrooms, and if you go to the farmer's market in Portland, you can meet the mushroom man, and he often has displays of all sorts of mushrooms that you can test out and try, and he's cooking them sometimes there on a little hibachi.
You mentioned, like with tomatoes, you know, the lycopene is better absorbed when cooked. I've also heard similar type things like with mushrooms and spinach. Is that true or not?
Yes and no. So the lycopene is better absorbed, but the tomatoes actually contain, you know, hundreds of carotenoids and all these other components. And some of those are going to be better absorbed cooked, and some of them are actually going to be better raw. I think what you're hearing with the spinach is more around there's a goitrogen kind of component of some of the fruits and vegetables where they're better cooked so that they're not impacting your thyroid. And the other one was mushrooms. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really eaten mushrooms raw. I don't know when you're getting supplements. I think they're freeze drying possibly, or kind of treating them in a way where they're not cooking them. But the polysaccharides that are the main action kind of in the mushrooms are not really going to get broken down or destroyed with cooking. I just think eating mushrooms usually tastes better when they're cooked. I'm not a big raw mushroom eater, but some people are. So essentially, you know, eat a variety of fruits and vegetables, eat them in a variety of ways, fresh, juiced, steamed, cooked, and look for the rainbow. So this idea of just eating one color, like look for the rainbow on your plate. When you're at the store, look for the rainbow. Look in your cart. Do you have 5 different colors of fruits and vegetables in your cart? Do you have 5 different colors of fruits and vegetables on your plate? It's a quick reminder of like, oh, interesting, my plate is all brown or it's all white or something. And being able to think, what can I add to this to be able to have more variety? Because they all have different carotenoids. Oh, there's that question mark I meant to take off. So in general, the diet, what we know is increased fruits and vegetables. And I have increased whole grains with a question mark. I actually meant to remove that question mark because I think that switching your diet to have more whole grains is important. We're going to talk about fiber in a little bit, and we're going to talk about what that actually does in your body. But eating more whole grains means that you're getting more fiber, you're getting more B vitamins, you're getting more nutrients. The reason I put the question mark there was because there's a lot of controversy in terms of whole grains and what kind of grains people can eat. And, you know, there's a lot of paleo diet, gluten-free diets. There's a lot of diets that talk about no grains, the low-carb diet, etc. So with diet, I think there's a big individual piece here. There's personal preference, you know, people who become vegetarian or vegan because of personal preference of not wanting to harm animals. There's also like how people feel. And some people feel better eating meat. And some people feel better not eating meat. And I think that there really is a variety in terms of what is the right diet and what is going to work for you. So I'm not here to kind of tell you there's only one diet. What I am here to tell you is to say eat more fruits and vegetables. No matter what diet you're eating, eat more fruits and vegetables. If you're going to eat grains, eat whole grains. Don't eat processed grains. Don't eat white rice and kind of all these crazy, more hybridized and processed grains. Eat them whole. Decrease the amount of processed foods that you're eating. Decrease sugar and alcohol and trans fats and preservatives, all the stuff that kind of has come into our diets in the last 30 or 40 years. And increase healthy proteins. So if you're eating meat, get that grass-fed meat. If you're not eating meat, nuts and seeds and beans and eggs and whey if you're doing dairy.
Hey, on the sugars, and I've heard something about that a little on that. What is this connection between sugars and cancer?
Yeah, so there's a pretty big connection between cancer and sugar. Cancer is a fast-growing group of cells, and they need energy, and they love sugar. I mean, that's part of it's the building blocks of what, of everything in our bodies, right? We need it for energy in order to make ATP. So when you have a lot of sugar in your diet, you're basically just giving cancer a total free ride. There's a lot of debates out there when people get diagnosed with cancer and people go on sugar-free diets or kind of try and avoid it. You can't actually avoid all sugar because all carbohydrates are getting kind of broken down into glucose, into building blocks of sugar. But you can certainly stop the free ride, and you can certainly reduce the amount of access that they have. And there are some diets where you really, really actually eliminate sugars and carbohydrates completely when you do a ketogenic diet. And there's been a lot of data with that being really effective with various cancers, including glioblastoma, which is a brain tumor that's very, very aggressive and fatal. And people who go on a ketogenic diet as a way of bypassing all of sugar metabolism, because normal and healthy cells can adapt, cancerous cells can't really. So they really need their sugar and they want it.
Yeah, and I don't suppose there's a way to starve the cancer out once you already have it. But I guess, as cells are growing and stuff like that, not to have that sugar available for them is probably a little bit more beneficial.
Yes. And, some people would say that the first thing actually is true, that you can starve it out even once you've had it. I mean, the examples with glioblastoma, are people who are living 12 and 15 years out, having been diagnosed with glioblastoma with no evidence of tumor anymore, on a ketogenic diet where they absolutely are eating no. And a ketogenic diet is not an easy thing to do, and, not something to try without a lot of support.
Yeah, 12 years, because glioblastomas, those are usually 6 months to a year. That's usually kind of go home and figure things out kind of diagnosis, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, Jean Wallace is a physician. She's down in Texas, I believe, and she has just done amazing work